Welcome to Trail Time Stories. We hope you enjoy the scenery as we read stories that step out of the normal day-to-day mundane routine and help put ourselves in the character of those that have been briefly pulled from their sanctuary of safety and all too often times their sanity. If you like the content, please like and subscribe as there will be much more content in the near future. I usually try to tell stories related to the state that I am in at the time. Stories to fit with where my trail walking video is taken. This time, I have decided to narrate stories which have no specific location mentioned in them. I suppose we can imagine them taking place anywhere we want. I don't know about you, but that doesn't at all take away any of the creep factor for me. Here are 5 creepy stories from unknown locations.
Growing up, I had a basketball-themed room. I had a basketball goal on my wall as a decoration, the kind without the pole that you would hang up on a garage. Our actual basketball goal was outside, and the net had become extremely weathered and tattered. Our HOA made us replace it, so we used the net from my room's goal. When I got around to replacing the net in my room, it was late one night right before going to bed. The net was way thicker than the old one, and I couldn't even get a loop through the hooks on the rim. I probably tried to get one loop on the net for 10 minutes before throwing it across the room in frustration. I was so angry. I have always slept with my door closed and locked to this day, which is what happened extremely creepy. After falling asleep, the next thing I remember is waking up in my bed. But I was hazy when I eventually woke up enough to see that my room door was open. This instantly confused and startled the hell out of me. I was horrified further when I saw a black hooded silhouette waddle its way up to my door frame from out of view in the hall. It stood completely still and just stared at me from an open door. This frightened me so much that I jerked awake for real this time. I instantly looked at the door and was relieved that it was still closed, and later confirmed that it was still locked. It was in the middle of the night, so I started falling back to sleep. I rolled over only to notice that my fucking basketball net was completely on. Not just one loop, the whole thing. The plastic hooks had been bent and contorted in order to fit the insanely thick net. Needless to say, I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night.
Story 2 was posted 5 years ago by Prime SRFR. I have had a couple of weird things happen, but the one that still scares me is an incident that happened at a cabin. It creeps me out for a couple of reasons. The first being that if it was all in my head, then I was in a really messed up place at the time. And the second being, if it really did happen, then what the did I see? Here you go. I'll be the first to say that all this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a freaky thing and can play some pretty trippy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. Whenever I was scared as a kid, my dad had always told me that in life you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my late teenage years, I came into some money after my father committed suicide, and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month, and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with a realtor and lawyer. So for that month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer, and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a change to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all the things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, and headed up in my dad's car that he had wheeled to me to the cabin. Now this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we were not using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarms, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. This has nothing to do with the coming story, but felt the need to mention it anyway. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal, and nothing out of the unusual happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, in the evenings playing PlayStation or listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. He had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty much a shut-in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVDs and PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that had preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had the living room and a side guest bedroom along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walk-out balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading into them shut. Open doors to dark rooms always creeped me out. Anyhow, the 3rd day came around, and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight, by the way, and he also since passed, playing games and watching DVDs. That day it was pretty heavy snowfall, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started getting a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 other cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block away from each other. All other cabins aside from these 2 were around a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Both these cabins were empty, and from the past couple of days, I knew that no one was currently staying there. Okay, I've given enough background and I'm going to jump to the weirdness. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi-fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20 to 30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone was staying in the cabin near me that I may not have noticed. Maybe they were shut-ins like me. Alright, whatever. The prints lead away from my cabin, and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees, disregarded the footprints, and went back inside. Nighttime came around and decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perked up to a standstill listening position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent. I was kind of freaked out and could hear him moving around downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs to me and started to do his doggy dance for the sign that he had to pee or that he wanted to go outside. Shit. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing, only he didn't want to pee. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull on his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prints had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing the side of the house and looking up towards the roof. After he figured out that I was not going to go to where he wanted, he sat himself down and just stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but all right. Maybe there are forest animals out there that he wants to chase down. But f*** this. Did not want to chance anything, so I pulled him back inside and we both headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of around 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from a tree onto the floor, or maybe a kind-hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing. The steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man-length stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting for me to let him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the time considered myself to be fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself. So I grabbed my coat and shoes, along with my cigarettes and flashlight, and went out onto the balcony. F*** it, right? As soon as I was outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on top was undisturbed. Weird. Must have all been in my head. What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia. I started to calm down and relax again. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just stared at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin and around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position in between two branches. It was squatted on one branch, and its arms were extended above its head, holding on to the branch above it. F*** me. What the f*** is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing, and stood just staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me and lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to, so I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to bed. But later on in the night, I heard light tapping at the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seemed to stare at the back door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part was that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door, but at the same time, I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and do not do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was, passed out eventually, and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non-eventful and nothing else out of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have been all in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, so I was pretty f***ed up from all the drama. Story number 3 was posted 5 years ago by George Sucks. I was up late one night watching TV alone in the living room when I was about 12. I heard my dog growling in the kitchen. Sometimes he does that when he sees something in the backyard. A cat, a squirrel, a plastic bag blowing in the wind, the moon or whatever. So I go to investigate and I see him standing at the door with the hair on his back standing way up, like the way I've only ever seen it when he's about to get into a fight or wants to. So I creep over and look out and I see nothing. After watching for a minute or two, I figured it was probably a raccoon that's gone now, so I opened the door and let the dog out. He stepped out a few feet and stopped in front of me, looking off towards the shed in the back corner of the yard. It's the middle of the night and only the back porch light is on, which isn't enough to really light up the whole yard. I looked off towards the shed and scanned around it and saw nothing. Then my eyes drifted upwards, towards the tree that hangs over the shed. There was some dark, unidentified shape up in the tree, and the instant my eyes fixed on it, it quickly floated up like a wisp of smoke being blown away, and disappeared in the backdrop of the night sky. It made no sound whatsoever, no flapping of wings, not even the rustling of branches. My dog went mental and started barking at it. He was still right in front of the door, so I reached forward and grabbed his collar. I yanked him inside and booked it out of the kitchen. I tried to wake up my mom, blabbering about some dark cloud in the tree, but she was fast asleep. To this day, I have no idea what it could have been. Story number 4 was posted 5 years ago by Gunko1. So this happened to me and my brother 3 years ago. Weirdest thing I have ever experienced. I live in Germany near Frankfurt, in a small town. I was out with friends, got a bit drunk, and my brother was supposed to pick me up. Way past midnight he finally shows up. I got in and we drove home. He was completely sober. I wasn't totally wasted, but I had a nice buzz going. It was a summer night and the night was completely clear. When we arrived at home, I opened the gate so my brother could park the car. Right when he was driving in, I noticed something odd. Our neighbors had a broken door light. It was blinking constantly. A white, not really strong light, and for the first few seconds I thought it was the light. But then I noticed that the light was much, much brighter and stronger. Right in this moment, my brother stopped the car, looked past me in a look of sheer terror. I turned around, and I swear to God, the whole wall of our neighbor's house was covered in a white, extremely intense blinking light irradiating from their yard. We could not see what was irradiating this light because of the wall, but it was bright enough to send shockwaves throughout the neighborhood. So my brother got out, and we both moved out of our parking lot to peek into our neighbor's yard, and I swear to God, nothing. We were speechless, turned around, and right there at the opposite row of houses on the other side of the street and the train rails in another house's yard, the same light. Bright enough to make you cover your eyes. After a few seconds it stopped, and it was never seen again. We had no idea what it was. We spent an hour smoking and drinking and discussing what it could have been, an electrical discharge of the atmosphere and whatnot. We didn't come up with a satisfying explanation. The light was huge, extremely bright, and white-colored. It definitely gave us a weird, unnerving feeling, and it didn't make any sense. Story 5 was posted 5 years ago by Super Saiyan Trunks. When I was 16, I would jump on my trampoline out back for hours every night. Literally hours. I would listen to my iPod and just daydream to get away from a rough family life. One night when I was jumping, a kid ran past our fence full speed carrying a box about the size and shape of a skateboard. He ran to the park behind my house and held it by the edge, then tossed it into the air so that it flipped a few times before landing on the ground. At this point, I was a little weirded out because he was just standing over it and staring for a pretty long time. Then out of nowhere, he just bolts full speed past our fence, like he didn't even notice I was there. Alright, that's a bit weird. I just kept jumping and staring at where the box was, and here's where it gets creepy. The box looked like it was moving, then something started to rise out of it. I actually stopped jumping and rubbed my eyes and watched as what looked like a full-grown man rose up out of a box that was like 2 inches thick. He had an elongated head with no hair. His skin was orange and his eyes were huge and pitch black. He raised one arm up to his side and the box just kind of went into what I can only describe as a trench coat. He walked over to the only pavilion we have at the small park, grabbed the metal beam holding up the overhang, and started to bang his head hard onto the beam over and over. At this point, I had rubbed my eyes quite a few times, and I couldn't even move. I had no idea what I was seeing. Then, without warning, he just stopped, and his head quickly whipped around and stared right at me. It was like he could feel me watching him. A giant, and I mean giant, smile came across his face as those dark eyes just stared at me, and he tilted his head back and forth a few times. I had goosebumps and my eyes started to tear up. Even typing this is making my hair stand on edge because I won't ever forget that look. As I was about to start crying, and I don't know why I wanted to cry, but his face just filled me with terror. He turned around and kind of phased down the road off into the distance. Phase, like those units the Protoss have in StarCraft that leave a trail of themselves for a short period of time, if that helps to explain it. He was gone. That was it. I bawled my eyes out and sprinted inside and called my best friend, who assured me I was seeing things and needed to calm down. I'm sure I sounded insane and no one would believe me, but this is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. I know what I saw, and to this day, when I think about it, my eyes begin to water and my hair stands on edge. This is a comment to the story left by Zen Slapped, also 5 years ago. that I thought some people, including myself, may find interesting. Well, if you can get that book, The Communion Letters, you should. The online reviews paint it as mostly alien-related, but that's not entirely accurate. Even the author has stated many times that he refuses to draw that conclusion. I read it, and the stories, as well as the descriptions of the creatures that the people saw, bear many similarities to what you saw there. I remember one person describing the creatures with large black eyes coming out of his kitchen oven at night. Yeah, makes no sense. There was a story told by the author in a different book of his that he was warned by them to not eat any sugar at all. He said he asked why, and a couple of nights later he got a frantic phone call from an acquaintance who said about a dozen of these creatures on the cover of your books suddenly stormed into her room, surrounded her bed, lifted it off the floor with her on it, and then set it back down again, after which they trotted out as fast as they came in. Turns out this woman was stricken with severe diabetes. He felt this was a communication from them regarding the sugar question. I could go on and on with these strange stories, but so much of what you wrote there has that same eerie surrealism to it. It is definitely worth a read if you want to hear of similar tales like you mentioned. Again, it was the mention of your family life difficulties that jumped out at me, as I have heard that authors state repeatedly that it seems to open the door to this from so many of the people he has met. Yet he has never really been able to say why for sure. Thank you for watching and listening to today's video and story. We know your time is valuable and really do appreciate that you spent some of it with us today. If you haven't already, then please like and subscribe, as it helps us greatly. We hope to see you again soon. Have a great day or evening. Trail Time Stories out.